So, Claudine, I would like to have you come up to the stage. Claudine is one remarkable woman, and she's been a friend for many years now. She was and still is the only woman member of Congress from the state of Rhode Island. She's a former member of Congress, and she apparently Rhode Island, while they have women, she told me, that are in like the Secretary of State and various state offices, she was historic and still remains the only woman from the state of Rhode Island that served in Congress in Washington, D.C. I'll read a little bit more because she's going to give a little short talk again to kind of inspire you with her path. Among the many firsts, she founded two nonprofit organizations, Results, which assembled the first environmental legal talent in Rhode Island. It stopped the first nuclear plant that was well along in the licensing process. She co-founded the Competitive Caucus in U.S. Congress. The result, transformative legislation because of the power of women in public office. She co-produced an Emmy Award-winning TV series, Influence U.S.-Soviet Relations, co-founded Energia Global, an early international energy efficiency and renewable energy company. The result, substantial profits from a 10-year exit strategy. And she even had a briefing with Margaret Thatcher on delivering a speech in French or Spanish and to co-hosting co-hosting the CNN coverage of the Senate Chief Justice confirmation hearings on Clarence Thomas, while also participating with Prince Charles in the BBC film on climate change. These are all part of her experience. So please join me in welcoming Claudine Schneider.
I am so thrilled to be here today with all of you present and future leaders. And Alexia, thank you so very much for having the vision, foresight, and hard work to pull this together. And I hope this is just the beginning of many such opportunities for women. I will give you, I'm so nervous in that I decided I better drink some coffee because I've never been asked to speak for only 5 minutes. So if I speak are you kidding me? Fit my life story into that. So I will give you some of the key points that, 2 words if you're taking notes, I'd like you to write down. So if you remember nothing else from all the information I share, one is that communication, the other word is purpose. And I'll share with you a little bit about each of those. But as a little girl growing up, my mother and father would always get extremely emotional whenever there was something on television, whether it be Bing Crosby or whatever, about World War II. Because my father was a soldier in World War II, and my mother was part of the Belgian underground, where her family was hiding Jews and hiding American soldiers and protecting them. And I watched their interaction and the various army buddies of my dad that would come to town and visit us, and I kept thinking, war is such a horrible thing. And then I started asking, what do we do to prevent war? And I realized if we could speak the other person's language, we could prevent war. So I decided I was going to be a language major. So I studied French and Spanish and Mandarin. When I got out of college, they weren't teaching Mandarin in the colleges then, so I went to night school at American University. And I took the Foreign Service exam because my goal in life was to build bridges of understanding. Well, zooming ahead a little bit, at age 25, the doctors told me that I had a 50-50 chance of living. And that was a real wake-up call because I had just gotten married and I was just about to start my life, not the Foreign Service, but as the wife of a gentleman who was the head of the EPA Ocean Pollution Division. And we were living in Rhode Island, and it occurred to me that my life, when I thought it was just beginning, could be over very shortly. So the doctors didn't say you have 1 month, 2 months, or whatever to live. They just said, 50-50 chance. So I went deeply into something I was taught as a little girl also, and that is we're all on this earth for a purpose. And I thought, whoa, okay, I've been a pretty good daughter, pretty good sister, pretty good student, but what's my purpose here? Because everybody has value, and we all have a contribution to make, and I hadn't really defined mine as yet. And I urge each of you in this audience tonight or tomorrow morning or before your meditation or whatever, look closely at why are you here? What is your purpose? Whatever it is, it's important. And the fact that you're in this room, all of us together, even amplifies that importance, that value. My belief is, my purpose on this earth is to leave this planet better than I found it. And this is what I've been dedicating my life to. So I'll give you a little synopsis. While I'm in this state of having been blasted to smithereens with radiation treatment, incidentally, it was cancer of the lymph system. So, bald, whenever I meet a guy who's bald, he says, oh, I'm so sorry I'm bald. It's like, shut up, I've been there twice already, Ain't no big fine. As I was sort of recuperating and suddenly found out they wanted to build a nuclear power plant down the way from us, I thought, wait a minute, this is New England. This is where democracy is. This is where each person has a vote. We have a voice. I read about town meetings in New England. How could they just go do this? So that lit the fire under me, organized nonprofits, organized a law firm. We killed it. But about that time. And once again, it was a situation where people said, oh, you can't fight City Hall, it can't be done. And I thank the woman who is here today circulating a petition on home rule and fracking. Could you raise your hand, please? Because those of you who haven't signed this and you live in Boulder, please do. Because if we all have a purpose and we really want to use our voice, this is certainly an opportunity for us to do so. So at any rate, as I was recuperating and, figuring out, all right, what's next, my husband, what happened was the mayor for the city of Providence, it was disclosed that he was going to be running for governor for the state of Rhode Island. But then it was disclosed on the Donahue show, if any of you remember that he had committed rape at gunpoint. So, all of a sudden, there's a big vacuum there for the seat of governor. And when we moved to Rhode Island, we decided, well, whatever the majority party is, that's not us, because they just seemed to be all white males, no minorities, no women, and they were all Catholic. And so that was very disconcerting. So we decided, all right, we're becoming Republicans. And we did. Well, that was pretty interesting. I ran twice. I lost the first time, shocked everybody, like, wow, how did that woman who was basically coming from nowhere, had no money, no experience, nothing to contribute to the process. How is it she got 48%? Well, I had a team of volunteers that were awesome, and that made the difference. The individual collective momentum of many people working together. So, I want to share with you a little story that once I got to Congress after my second try, I was there for 10 years, and I was curious. I thought, well, I am blessed in that I am in this position of power, and I am one of the few women there, and I have a responsibility to further the welfare of women. And so we pushed the economic equity package, we pushed a whole lot of pieces of legislation. I cannot believe, and it's heartbreaking for me to tell you now, that when I was there in the 1980s, women were making 73 cents on every dollar a man makes. What is this? How many years later, how many decades later? And we're making, 78 cents for every dollar a man makes? Ladies, we got our work cut out for us. This is obscene. Finally, we have a president who is putting this front and center as part of his effort, and I just wish that we were electing more women to Congress. This off-year election so that we could further our agenda over the next 2 years. And we should not be sitting on our hands waiting for a woman president. Because in Congress, one of the things that was very clear to me from the outset, and when you're inside the Beltway, you live this, you know that. The president proposes and the Congress disposes. And I am so sick and tired of all of the expectations that have been built for the presidency of the United States, when in fact, the president primarily only has the power to propose a vision of where our nation could go. And it's up to the Congress to either follow or come up with a better idea. But this Congress, for the last several years, has decided they're just going to say no. And we have stagnated, not because of our president, because I am amazed every day when he figures out a way to get around the system and push an agenda forward. I jump up and cheer. That takes courage, that takes vision, and a lot of figuring out, like, how do we do this and still, get something done. So, I also should tell you that at one point I was in one of the women's little meetings, and I was curious, and I said to some of my friends, I said, why did you decide to run for Congress? And the first woman said, well, I have 2 children, and I will tell you that I've been very discouraged about the role of the federal government in education. I think there's so much more that we could be doing. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. And the next person, that congresswoman was from California. Well, why did you run? Well, I got to tell you, the transportation system is something we should be putting more attention to. Mass transit instead of all of these cars, all air pollution, blah, blah, blah. I thought, oh, that's interesting. And the third woman, healthcare. So I thought, wow, each of these women were motivated to run for office because they wanted to solve a problem. So then I thought, I think I'll ask the guys. So I went to some of my male friends and I said, hey, why did you run for Congress? And the first one said, well, my father was in politics and, our family was always engaged and involved. And I thought, that would be a good thing to do. I thought, oh, that's interesting. And I asked another guy and he said, oh, yeah, my family was not involved, but I always thought when I was in high school, I ran for president of the class. And then when I got to college, I ran for, the president. And so I thought, well, I'll run for mayor, then I'll run for Congress, then I'll run for the presidency, And so they were always thinking in terms of career advancement. And the women, on the other hand, were always thinking of, how can I make this country better? How can I serve my constituency? How can I solve these problems? So if that in itself isn't enough reason to get more women in public office, I don't know what is. The other thing is that as we look forward, is my time about over? Yeah, okay. As I look at the future, which my brother is a therapist, and he would always tease me because I would go insane when my mother would always talk about the past. And it's like, all right, Mom, World War II is over, let's move on with it. And my brother is very Buddhist, living in the present moment, but I'm always looking 3 and 4 and 5 steps ahead. And as I look at the future, there are basically 3 things that I think we need to really, really focus on in terms of women and leadership. One is the political arena. It is so disgusting now that if you were to ask me about different candidates or this or that, there's not much I can tell you, but please write this down. I helped to found another nonprofit called votesmart.org. If you go to votesmart.org and send this around to all of your friends who may not have voted this yet, it will give you the voting record and the ratings and the sources of political contributions for all the different candidates. And it's pretty interesting that only 20% of those who were approached actually answered. And that's, they did not pass the political courage test. However, there is a whole force of political science college student interns that look up this data from the congressional record. So votesmart.org will tell you what you need to know. But we clearly need more women in political office. And I'm on the faculty of Rutgers University, which is has the Center for American Women in Politics. And the reports this year are not very good. And that's because the divide is just not an economic divide. It's also a communication divide. And I think we, women, need to stop saying we're either left or right. We need to use that new language of being in the center. And there is nothing weak about bringing parties together. There is nothing weak about designing a solution that is a compromise, and it is possible. And so when it comes to where do we need more women leaders, clearly in the political arena, everywhere, right away. And if you think you want to elect Hillary Clinton to the presidency, you better start today, because this is going to be an uphill battle, because the opponents are just going to do their thing on women in general. The good news is, when my opponent said to me, Claudine, why are you out working so hard? You're going to lose anyway. Well, it was fortunate that he then added, pretty soon you'll be back scrubbing floors and washing dishes again. Well, there was a reporter within earshot. And when that was put in the newspaper, all of a sudden, all these women who were sort of ignoring me, like, well, who does she think she is that she can run, you know? Because there is that among women. You know, we're not all sisters. There are some that have that attitude of, well, I'm as good as you are, you know, and I ran into a lot of that as I was, you know, running. Well, that all changed once the men said, hey, get back and wash those dishes and scrub those floors. The other thing, in addition to political, is what I was talking about earlier, and that is communication. Oh my God. If any of you are in advertising or marketing or communication of any type, Alexia mentioned that I received an Emmy. It's actually from ABC Network, and what is so astonishing to me is the horrible job that the local news is doing on everything. I don't know if there's anybody in this room that loves watching evening news, but I think it's a joke, and we need a new model for communicating what is important and what enhances our quality of life and creates a vision of what is possible. So, marketing, communications, media, all of that is critical. The third area where we need more leadership, you may have heard of the United Nations report that was just released, another one this morning, and I'm sad that it was released on a Sunday because a lot of people are going to miss it. But it amplifies that humans are responsible for climate change, and yes, climate change is really happening right now, no question about it. When I was in 1988, I introduced the first revenue-neutral Global Warming Prevention Act. That legislation, pieces of it passed. The energy efficiency piece passed. I brought together Frigidaire, Maytag. I said, guys, you're either with me or against me, but we're going to move this legislation through and require that there be standards that you have to meet for energy efficiency. And then some of you may have heard of Clinton's program, Cash for Clunkers. Well, it was in my legislation. It was called gas guzzler rebates. So during time, pieces of my legislation has moved forward, but it's not been without a whole lot of effort. With or without legislation, we can still change the world. And quite frankly, I think on a higher level, that's why all of you are gathered here today. You're here to change the world, to make a difference, to be leaders. And in contrast to the previous speaker, my attitude is failure is not an option. You may fail, I may fail, but for the most part I haven't. But it's because somebody said to me, Claudine, you're like a pit bull on the pant leg of opportunity. It's like, yeah, man, I'm going to go for it. If we can't jump over it, we're going to dig a tunnel under it, or we'll go around it, but we'll find a way to get where we want to go. And that's the kind of determination and fearlessness that we need among all of you. So I'm counting on all of you. Please be part of this team that changes the world, because we need each and every one. Thanks.